All right. So the next demo up is by somebody who has been experimenting with and blogging about sous vide for 10 years. His approach is practical rather than repeating what everybody else is saying. He conducts experiments to determine what truly works. He shares his experiments on stefangourmet.com, where you can find over 300 sous vide recipes, as well as many background articles that will help you really understand sous vide. Today, he'll be showing us how he uses sous vide to prepare the French classic Boeuf Bourguignon. Please welcome Stefan Boer.
Hi, I'm Stefan of StefanGourmet.com. My passion is food and cooking. I'd like to discover new recipes and new techniques and share them with the world on my blog. I started blogging 12 years ago, around the same time when I discovered sous vide. This is why a large part of StefanGourmet.com is dedicated to sous vide, with hundreds of articles on sous vide, including recipes, comparisons between various time and temperature combinations for a myriad of ingredients, and technical background articles. When Mike asked me to contribute to a showcase about classical French dishes using sous vide, the first thing that came to mind was Boeuf Bourguignon. It is a true French classic for a reason, because it is so packed with flavor. When preparing it on a stovetop, there is always the risk that the beef will turn out dry or tough. By braising the beef sous vide, you can be sure that the meat will always turn out tender and juicy. And the best part is that you can forget about it while it is cooking, so it is less stressful to prepare it this way. My recipe is similar to that of Julia Child, but I strongly disagree with her on one important aspect. The beef should not be lean, but it should be nicely marbled. The flavor is in the fat. For 2 servings, you will need about 400 grams of chuck roast cut into a thick steak. Season the beef with salt and allow the salt to penetrate into the meat for at least an hour before browning. To brown the beef, I recommend clarified butter, also known as ghee. This is butter from which the water and protein has been removed, so it is pure fat. Removing the water means it won't be spattering, and removing the protein means it has a very high smoke point and won't burn as easily as regular butter would. An important technique to brown the beef more easily and to keep more juices inside of it is to brown it as steaks rather than cubes. Cubes will release more liquid that will block the browning process, and turning all those cubes individually is much more work than turning 1 or 2 steaks. Brown the beef over high heat on all sides. When the beef is nicely browned, set it aside on a plate. It should be completely raw on the inside. We brown the beef because the browning adds a lot of flavor. It does not seal in the juices. Do not clean the pan, but use the drippings from the beef to make the sauce. Add 40 grams of bacon in small strips, called lardons in French. Sauté them over medium heat until they are golden. Because fat means flavor, I am not cooking the bacon in boiling water before adding it to the dish, as in the Julia Child recipe. Then add 60 grams each of diced carrot and onion, and sauté them over medium heat until they are golden. Add a tablespoon of concentrated tomato paste and stir over low heat. Add a crushed clove of garlic and stir over low heat. Make sure the garlic does not get too dark, because that will make it bitter. Deglaze the pan with 200 milliliters of red wine. The proper wine to use for Boeuf Bourguignon is of course a red Burgundy, but another red wine will work as well. You don't have to use expensive wine for cooking, as the aromas will dissipate anyway. But you should not use bad wine either, because a sour or bitter wine will make the dish sour or bitter. A wine for cooking should be good enough to drink, and preferably similar to the wine you will be serving with the dish, because that will help with the pairing. A bouquet garni is bay leaf, parsley and thyme tied together with kitchen twine to make it easy to remove the herbs from the dish later on. Reduce the wine to half over medium heat to get rid of the alcohol. When the wine has been reduced by half, add 200 milliliters of beef stock. This should preferably be homemade, as store-bought stock often contains too much salt. You should definitely not use bouillon, because that consists primarily of salt. Allow the liquid to reduce to half, stirring now and then. Reduction is an important step of the recipe as it concentrates the flavors. As in a vacuum-sealed plastic bag, no further reduction can take place. All of the reduction needs to happen before cooking sous vide. When the meat has cooled off enough for you to handle it, cut it into bite-sized cubes. You will notice that the beef will still be rare on the inside. Allow both meat and sauce to cool completely, first to room temperature and then in the refrigerator. Then combine the meat with the sauce and vacuum seal them together. This is easiest with a chamber vacuum sealer because those machines are able to vacuum seal liquids. If you have an external vacuum sealer, you could also vacuum seal and cook the meat without a sauce and then combine meat and sauce again after cooking the meat sous vide. Cook the meat sous vide for about 24 hours at 74 Celsius or 165 Fahrenheit. The timing is not critical as a few hours more or less will not make a noticeable difference. If you have the time, 48 hours at 68 Celsius or 155 Fahrenheit may produce even better results. Boeuf Bourguignon is not just about the beef, but also about sautéed mushrooms and braised pearl onions. I cook them separately and add them at the end so that they will keep more of their own flavor. Sauté 125 grams of baby button mushrooms in 2 tablespoons of clarified butter. Make sure to use a large frying pan so the water that comes out of the mushrooms when you sauté them can easily evaporate. Otherwise, the mushrooms will be boiled rather than sautéed. If you can't find baby mushrooms, you can also use regular mushrooms and cut them into halves or quarters. When the mushrooms are done, place them on paper towels to drain. Season them with salt at the very end. The most laborious part of this recipe is peeling the pearl onions. Bring a pot of water to a boil and blanch 125 grams of onions for 1 minute. Then transfer them with a strainer to cold water to cool off. Blanching the onions will make the skin come off more easily, but it is still a lot of work. Use a small knife to remove the roots and open up the skin at the top. Peel the onions with your fingers. Try to keep the onions whole. Select a pot into which the onions will fit in a single layer with just enough room to spare for a bouquet garni. Sauté them in 1 tablespoon of clarified butter over medium-high heat. Shake the pot to turn them and try to brown them as evenly as possible on all sides. Season the onions with salt and freshly ground black pepper and add 120 milliliters of red wine and a bouquet garni. Cover the pot and allow it to braise, stirring now and then for 45 minutes. Check whether it doesn't become too dry, and if it does, add a bit more red wine or a bit of water. We will thicken the sauce with a classic French method that is called beurre manier. This is 15 grams or 1 tablespoon of soft butter at room temperature mixed with 15 grams or 1.5 tablespoons of flour. Mix them together with a fork or your fingers. Place a pan over low heat. Take the bag with the meat out of the sous vide and cut it open. Pour the liquid into the pan, but keep the meat in the bag for now. Add the beurre manier to the liquid and stir until it has dissolved. Raise the heat and stir until the sauce has thickened. Then add the remaining contents of the bag, stir and turn off the heat. Now add the sautéed mushrooms and braised onions and stir to mix. Your Boeuf Bourguignon is now ready to be served and enjoyed. Make sure to serve it on preheated plates that you preheated in the oven at about 100 degrees Celsius or 200 Fahrenheit. The meat will be cooked perfectly, tender and juicy. I hope you liked this video. You can find the recipe with step-by-step photos on my blog at stefangourmet.com. Thank you for watching, and if you do visit my blog, please leave a comment and feel free to ask any questions.
This recipe for me was a great reminder that there's very little I actually know about French cooking. That was so beautiful, so educational. I learned a ton from that. I love when demoers include little tips throughout. That was really, really great. I can't wait to try that recipe. I love a like slow sous vide cook, especially when it comes to beef. But considering how many of us mentioned short ribs in the beginning, I think that's probably our go-to. And now we have something new we can add to our regular slow cook via sous vide rotation. That was gorgeous. I'm so excited to try that myself.